I want you all to know, I just saw Wayne Frazier, who's an activist in the 49th Ward, go walking past, and I just wanted you all to know that you can see copies or see the radio show that we do on YouTube these days. If you go to the channels on YouTube and you hit Heartland Media, one word, you can see live from the Heartland, and there's one of Wayne Frazier who just walked by talking about a black man going into a little Iowa town and knocking on a door and saying he was there for Barack Obama, and this guy in overalls going, "All right, Barack Obama, he's my man. Come on in. I want some hot chocolate." So it's a nice little clip of Wayne, and you can see a lot of other people that have been featured on this show. That's Heartland Media on YouTube.org. And we are going to have now somebody who I have been talking to for years. He goes to chapel over at Loyola. He meets some young people, and they come over here, and they do a lot of talking. This guy can talk, and his name is David James, and we are spiritually related. I actually have an uncle named David James. This is David F. James, and he's up here. He's got his red tail hat on from the Tuskegee Airmen. He is the legendary David James, and good morning to you, David.
Good morning.
It's so glad to have you on the show. We've talked about doing this a lot.
At long last, I have appeared on Heartland's Saturday morning broadcast.
Got to get real close to that microphone.
Well, I have to get real
You got to hunch up there. Okay.
It doesn't bite, does it?
Nah, it might bite you. All right, David, one of the first things I learned about you, I have a daughter and you have a granddaughter, and they came up in school together.
Right.
So we've been bumping into each other for a number of years, and I think it was around the time of the Harold Washington campaign that I first became aware of your work and you and the things that you do. You were involved with the Tuskegee Airmen.
Right.
And why don't you tell the listeners what the Tuskegee Airmen, what that was all about, and how many of you are left? And I know you just came back from being guests of the new president and participated in the inauguration. So fill us in on the Tuskegee Airmen and what they did and what they're doing today.
Well, during the Second World War, aviation was just beginning to take off as a factor in engaging in prosecuting a war. And of course, the Battle of Britain was at the Second World War was really ultimately. I know there's a lot of dispute about it, but it was ended, as we all know, over Hiroshima and Nagasaki when they dropped the A-bomb and killed 125,000 people. But before that, there was a war both in the Pacific and in Europe. And a vital part of that war, the Battle of Britain, particularly when the German Air Force tried basically to bring Britain to its knees, a few fighter pilots who fought, who actually turned back the German determination to really end the war by saturating Britain with all kinds of horrible missiles and just about everything you can think of. So it was America, of course. When we entered the war, we did not have really an air force to speak of, and we almost began from scratch. And I like to tell people that aviation was in a very primitive state at that point. The first car that I drove didn't have a self-starter. The first airplane that I flew didn't have a self-starter either. It had an open cockpit and bi-wings, but gradually, during the World War particularly, aviation evolved very rapidly. I went from an open cockpit airplane to probably the most sophisticated aircraft that we had during the Second World War, and that was the P-51, the Mustang, which was quite a weapon. But that was actually the prevailing wisdom at that time, or the accepted wisdom was that African Americans weren't bright enough weren't smart enough, weren't intelligent enough to fly an airplane. And essentially, it was the effort of the president of Tuskegee Aircraft. Tuskegee was part of the Civilian Air Corps at that time. They had their own, they were training pilots then. And Patterson, who was then the president of Tuskegee Institute, really got the military to consider training Negro, or African American, or colored pilots. And it began as an experiment, and the military knew that it would fail. And to their surprise, I'm sitting here.
How many Negroes or African Americans actually participated in the Tuskegee Air Corps?
Well, the program actually began in 1941 with about half dozen, including Benjamin O. Davis Jr., who was the first African American to graduate from West Point after Reconstruction. He and a few other pilots, one of them from Chicago, a guy by the name of Roberts, were in the first group that would actually train at Tuskegee. And they went on to acquit themselves very nicely, I guess, during the whole Second World War. But there were about 1,200 of us trained. I was what they call a single-engine, single-seater pursuit pilot. We also trained a whole group of bomber pilots, B-25 pilots, who never went overseas, never went into combat. But the single-engine, single-seater pursuit pilots like David James,
David F. James.
We ended up in Italy. Began in North Africa, Sicily, and in Italy, in the invasion of Italy. And our combat was basically but about 1,200 of us were trained both as bomber pilots and as fighter pilots.
How many of you guys are still left around and still
Not
kicking,
many.
as we
About
say?
120 of us are still alive out of the 1,200 that were trained.
And so Barack Obama, our new president, invited you to come to the inauguration.
He did.
How many of you showed up?
Well, about 100 of us actually showed up. So
Now I know I watched it on TV. I saw you driving by, and I didn't see you particularly, but I saw the
whole group.
float,
Yeah.
the whole group.
Yeah.
How cold was it? And did you have?
Cold.
I saw Michelle Obama walking around in high heels. She must have had those foot warmers on or something.
I
what
think
did you have? How did you stay warm?
I had about 7 layers of clothes on me. My daughter was with me, and we were. With this ticket, we were admitted to this is a program. This is actually the actual invitation to the inaugural ceremony. And this is the ticket that admitted us to the west stands of the Capitol. And we were escorted, and we were actually set right right beneath the dignitaries. So we were very close. I could see the whole thing. And afterwards, the security was incredible. We had to be, what do they call it, vetted. If you know Washington and you know where a Bowling aircraft is, we had to report there at 6 o'clock in the morning. The Air Force was about as congenial as they could be. They escorted us to the actual ceremonies, and they fed us. And they really fed us great. When I went, the first verse I learned in the Army was, if you don't like your beans and your hardtack, if you don't like your slum gutter stew, remember it's not your dear mama, Uncle Sam is feeding you. So